Hey, I'm just recording this video to give some feedback for the group about the lab reports. So I just want to point out some um, mistakes that folks have made. So even if I neglected to include it in my comments to you, I want you to make sure you look at this video and incorporate this feedback into your lab report edits. So I think we had these four sections: question, claim, evidence, and reasoning. And then reasoning had three subsections. The rubric is really important here. I think folks may have not looked at the rubric. Just if you're going for a 4 or 3, just make sure you look at what it says for each of the four science standards, and that will give you some important insight. So here are a few things. You have your question. I think that was pretty straightforward. That's based on the experiment that you designed, so you just form it to a question. The claim, make sure it's the claim, basically your conclusion, what you're concluding. Um, the evidence, it should be for this particular experiment should be a bar graph with error bars. Some folks I think left their bars if they did it on Google Sheets with the same color. That typically indicates that you were unable to apply a different margin of error for each group, and it's highly unlikely that you had the same margin of error for all of your groups. So make sure you do take a look at the if we scroll all the way down to the tutorial about bar graphs with error bars, I make a comment about if they're all the same color. Yeah, right here. This is a glitch. If they're all the same color, this is what you have to do in order to assign a different color. And assigning a different color allows you to create a different error bar for each group. So make sure you take that into consideration. The other thing, so let's go through the standards. So after our evidence, go to our reasoning, then we look at our methods. Notice that there are actually two different paragraphs. So you're answering two different questions. So make sure you are addressing both of these questions. The other thing is, there were some variables that you did not change. You need to specify those variables and the levels so that if someone were repeating your experiment, they know to keep the duration of infection to 3 days uh, or whatever other variables that you kept the same. So don't just say here are the variables that we changed. You also have to specify the ones you did not change to allow someone to repeat that experiment. When we go into data analysis, um, this is where you're making your argument. So you need to pull in your data for your claim, and also don't ignore the second question. This is where you talk about the margin of error and the confidence intervals. So this is when you talk about whether those confidence intervals overlapped or not, and that should be incorporated into your claim. So for example, if you said your data was not significantly different, then you can't make the claim that there was a difference. So you really need to pay close attention to whether those confidence intervals allow for you to say that they're different. And then the application, I think a few people kind of shortchanged this and tried to knock this out in like 2 sentences. You really do need to make some claims here about whether this makes sense. So if you said the duration of infection had no impact on the death count, well, you need to make sense of that. You need to make it out. Does that make sense? You may have to do some research, look up some things, or based on just on your common sense and what you know about biology, and explain why or why not. Um, if your claim sort of contradicts what you think should be true, then you need to go into detail about why the claim doesn't match up. And if it does match up, then you need to explain why it does. So don't shortchange this, even though it's at the very end of the lab report. So making sure you're looking at these standards, right? So if you're looking at Sci 1 experimentation, this is really about your methods and the design of your experiment. So how will I know your experiment is controlled if you never specify, hey, these are the variables that we kept exactly the same, and these are the levels, right? Um, when you're talking about your claim here, there's a difference between level 3 and level 4. So make sure you look at the text here to make sure you are doing all those things. Um, Again, here this is, I think, pretty straightforward, and here this is also pretty straightforward. So I think what you have to do is you have to make sure you're paying attention to the actual science standards to see, maybe you can self-assess yourself before you turn in your lab reports. All right, I hope this was helpful. Thanks.